Hi everyone, it's Ren here. Welcome to my room, guys. I hope you're well today. Today we're going to be looking into a philosophical concept that I think is essential to the life of an INFJ, and this is the concept of bad faith, as articulated by the existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. Before I move on to this topic, let me remind you that I've written a book on the INFJ type, the Ecstatic Soul, which is the deepest investigation of the INFJ you'll find online. If you have a good, handy knowledge of the INFJ, the function stack, and you've read some articles online, but you like to go deeper, get a sense of what the INFJ consciousness is like, what the INFJ mind is like, this is absolutely the book to get, and it comes with advice as to how to lead a meaningful and fulfilling existence. It's available in paperback and ebook format and is less than $10. All the links are available in the description box down below to all the Amazon websites. If you have any question, you can let me know and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So, what is the concept of bad faith, mauvaise foi in French, bad faith? And why do I think that it is an essential concept for the INFJ? One reason is actually that it's closely connected to some of the arguments that I develop in this book. So before I move to a definition, I'll give an example that comes straight from chapter 2 of this book, I believe. Now, chapter 2 of this book is called The World Recovered. So it's about how to overcome alienation and recovering a world by the same process. I mention in this particular chapter two ways in which the INFJ can persist in alienation by, although having become aware of it, which is always a good first step. You know, when you become aware of something that you need to fix, or that it is very likely that you need to fix it, you really have two options. One option is to address the problem and fix it. The other option is to pretends there's really no problem or justify an absence of an attempt to address the problem. And the mode of justification is quite common to INFJs. So this is where we find the case of the evasive INFJ and the evasive INFJ and the dismissive INFJ. Now, the evasive INFJ is the INFJ who behaves like an FE dominant for most of the time, and who lose themselves amongst the others, thereby depriving themselves of their anti-dominant essence. Whereas dismissive INFJs are INFJs who are very steeped in a self-conscious manner, but whose brand of alienation is more channeled through the TI function, which is that they refuse to perceive interaction with other people as cooperation, or even better, as collaboration. And so the way in which these are instances of bad faith is the following. What Sartre says is that bad faith is essentially an existential phenomenon that most of us will be familiar with. In the simplest terms, it's when you convince yourself that you don't have other options. In other words, imagine that there's something that you would like to do. Let's say you don't like your job and you would like to go back to university, or rather, let's say you don't like your job, let's say you work in an office and you really want to be a psychologist. Totally different kind of path. You know that this would make you feel better, that this would be much more suited to your temperament. What do? A lot of people they have identified the problem. A lot of people, what they would do, the majority, I would say, is to eventually come to a conclusion that says, I will not swap careers because it's financially complicated, because I need to go back to university and it would take a long time, because maybe third, I don't have the intellect that I used to have, or the freshness of intellect that I used to have to go back to university. I wouldn't know how to cope with being in university again. Maybe another reason could be, I'm married, I have children, and I need to be a provider, and while I'm studying, I can't do that. So all sorts of justifications would be mustered to support inaction, staying within this unhappy, unsatisfying line of work. What Sartre is trying to suggest to us is that bad faith is an existential disposition which is more fundamental than the arguments and justifications we give rationally for not acting. So essentially what he's saying is, we may look like we're being very responsible and very rational and very considered when we say it would be very costly. I would be unemployed for a while, perhaps, so I'd have to only work part-time. I don't know if I would fare well in university if I'm 45 or 50, something like that. What Sartre says is that these rational arguments are actually not originating from a rational place. They're originating from, not even really from an emotional place. To claim that they originate from an emotional place is argued by a number of well-known philosophers. One among them is the famous Scottish Enlightenment philosopher David Hume, who claims that all reason is not self-causing and it's always originating in instinct, or what he calls the passions. But Sartre says, again, it's more in line with what I call the existential constitution of the INFJ. That Sartre says that bad faith is something prior to that. It's almost like this back to the existential anxiety we feel at knowing how free we are to do things. Nothing is stopping you from studying to become a psychologist and becoming one. And you have a lot of ways of making it work out. Sure, you might have to work more, work late if you still need to make money, if you need to work part-time. Sure, you'll have to go to college and deal with that, but you can really do it. And there's so many examples for our choice of partners, for our choice of career paths, for our choice of where to live. Oh, I don't really know other countries. I don't know if I would do well there, so I'd rather stay where I am, even though I'm sick of, French culture, Austrian culture. We spend a lot of time using Sartre and bad faith without knowing it, and we always justify things to ourselves rationally when, in fact, the origin of this is not rational. It's existential, and it's anxious existentiality. This is very connected to the modes of evasiveness and dismissiveness in INFJs that I've discussed in chapter 2. It's exactly what's going on. INFJs who are in the dismissive attitude essentially I want to start with the evasive attitude, essentially convince themselves of the following. And I'd say among my audience, some will recognize themselves, even if it's uncomfortable. It's always good to be able to have the self-acceptance to recognize these things. They'll justify their evasive mode of being by saying, well, I might be an INFJ, but I'm not that smart. I'm not that confident. I'm very, very introverted. And I don't have any charisma. And so I was kind of born to be a follower, and it's easier, honestly. Now, this is bad faith, because you can have more charisma by having more confidence. You get more confidence by having more self-acceptance. You get more self-acceptance by examining yourself and, practicing self-love, which a lot of it consists in taking the criticisms of others less importantly, like changing your perspective. So we're again back to this idea of changing your perspective on interactions with other people from conflict to cooperation. Now, they might not see it like that. I always stress this point, but if your perspective is about cooperation, that's all you need. You don't need to convince them that they're cooperating with you, if that's what you see from a perspective of your own self-improvement. At the end of the day, people who criticize you are taking an interest, even if it's expressed in negative terms. You negative the negative, you negate the negative, and it becomes positive. So it's all a matter of perspective. And once you embrace yourself more and get a sense of the fact that you cannot change the fact that your nature, if you're an INFJ type, it's in your nature to have the NI cognitive function, and you have the NI cognitive function as your dominant. You have a unique perspective on life, however worth it is seen as by other people, because the worth of a particular vision or opinion is always a matter of, debate within a community, and it's decided by the community. There's no transcendental rule that says your vision is worthless and another's is great. It's always a matter of, how it's perceived and how it's agreed upon by other people. So you have a unique perspective whether you not like it or not. However inchoate or clarified it is. You can work on the clarification of it. So if you embrace that, you'll become more confident and more charismatic by the same token. So it's bad faith. You can avoid evasiveness, if you pardon me this rather cumbersome pun. And for dismissiveness, it's essentially the same argument, because dismissiveness is evasiveness under a different mask. Rejecting others viciously, vehemently, because fundamentally you're afraid of what they're going to say to you and how they're going to dismantle your insights. Once you accept that your insights are never meant as an anti-dominance to come clean and completely organized straight away. When you abandon that hope, the force of other people's criticisms will also be diminished, and you'll see mostly the cooperation and what they contribute to improve your self-perception. So you can overcome that bad faith. But the last point that I want to make, and it's an important point, is that bad faith is more pernicious than just cases where it applies to evasive modes of existence or dismissive modes of existence. It applies at all sorts of different levels, like you saw, case of careers, case of life choices of all sorts, romantic partners, and so on. It applies everywhere. And it also applies, it has to be said, to people who identify as INFJs when they use the INFJ label as a justification for not doing certain things that they would like to do. They'll say, after all, I'm an INFJ. I was born this way. You know, if you read this book, you know that being an INFJ means having a certain qualitative constitution in terms of your consciousness. But it says nothing about your quantitative possibilities. And there are many, many possibilities. And I meet too many people who employ what I would call bad faith. And I do that myself sometimes. It's almost impossible to never be in bad faith at certain points when life is difficult or particular situations are tough to handle. Remember, INFJ is a concept to understand yourself better. It says something about the quality of your consciousness. It does not say anything about the number of quantity of your possibilities and what you can do. So take the INFJ concept, ideally, like I try to do in this book, as an enhancing tool to look at your possibilities in a much more ambitious fashion and a much healthier fashion. But do not see this tool as limiting you in any way, because if it's limiting you more than it's enhancing you, then it's not helping you. So be careful. Whenever you say, well, I'm an INFJ, therefore I can't do this. Well, I mean, there are cases where that's true, you know. It's unlikely that most INFJs will be happy being, you know, in an employment that's very, very manual and where you do a lot of work with your hands. But there are so many fields where that does not apply. So be careful. Use the INFJ label as a way to overcome bad faith and not as a way to reinforce it. And I would guarantee you that Sartre would agree with me. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a like, drop a comment, and consider subscribing. I'll talk to you soon, guys. Bye-bye.